behind him, Emily's proposed battle plan rotated in all its chaotic glory. The silence in the room was deafening. "You can't be serious." Fleet Commander Vexon finally spoke, all four of his hearts visibly pulsing with stress. "You want us to entrust the defense of the Sol system to a child's game strategy?"
I'm Dr. Sergei Sorin, Medical Director of the Shili Sorin Wellness Institute. I'm about to give you the most valuable health tip I could possibly provide. If you or someone you love is living with ongoing health challenges, or if you are simply interested in better health as you age, go to lifesavingformulas.com. There, you will learn about cellular support of the normal.
Graphic display shifted, showing Emily's latest stream. She sat cross-legged on her bed, surrounded by snacks and energy drinks, coordinating with gaming teams across the planet. The timestamp showed 3 a.m. local time. "Look at these deployment patterns." The Admiral highlighted the complex dance of fleet movements Emily's group had designed. They're using solar radiation flares as sensor masks, coordinating through quantum-entangled comm arrays that technically shouldn't even be possible. And he paused for effect. They're doing it while arguing about who gets the last pizza roll. A Centaurian admiral's bioluminescence flashed in distress patterns, but it violates every principle of established space combat doctrine. Exactly. Zextal brought up another feed, showing Jason's rapid-fire calculations. The swarm's tactical computers are based on centuries of established combat doctrine. They literally cannot compute responses to strategies they don't believe should exist. The display split to show multiple streams. Minji in Seoul orchestrating a complex flanking maneuver, Sarah in London developing quantum shield harmonics, Miguel in Mexico City refining their sensor masking techniques. All of them working together, none of them over 15 years old. 3 hours ago, Zextal continued, this group of children identified a fundamental flaw in the swarm's neural network architecture, something our best analysts missed because they were too trained to see it. Want to know how they found it? He played the clip. Emily was laughing with her friends over voice chat. It's just like that glitch in Level 9. You know, where if you give the enemy AI too many weird inputs at once, it totally freaks out and blue screens. The council chamber erupted in overlapping arguments. Strategic algorithms that had taken decades to develop were being casually rewritten by teenagers who still had to raise their hands to use the bathroom. The swarm will reach primary defense range in 4 hours, Zextal's voice cut through the chaos. Their tactical computers will have calculated every possible response based on standard military doctrine. But they haven't calculated what happens when you let human children ignore the impossible. He brought up Emily's final battle plan. It looked like beautiful chaos. Fleets moving in patterns that defied conventional physics, attack sequences that read more like a dance choreography than military tactics. The Centaurian Admiral's chief tactician actually fainted. "Sir," a junior officer interrupted, "the human children are. They're asking if they can start their raid early. Apparently, someone named Katie has a dentist appointment later and doesn't want to miss the boss fight." Fleet Commander Vexon's tentacles twisted in resignation. This is madness. Complete madness. Yes, Zextal agreed, watching as Emily's global gaming network finalized their preparations. But it might be exactly the kind of madness we need. The swarm expects us to think like military commanders. Instead, we're going to think like kids who don't know what they're not supposed to be able to do. On the main screen, Emily was sending out the final coordination messages, her voice bright with excitement. "Okay, everyone, this is just like the tournament finals, except with real ships. Remember, weird patterns confuse the AI. Quantum shields go up before you burst fire the plasma cannons, and no fighting over kill counts until after we win." The fate of the Sol system now rested in the hands of a middle school gaming club. And somehow, that was starting to feel like humanity's best possible defense. The combined fleet hung in the void of space, their formation unlike anything seen in 10,000 years of galactic warfare. Admiral Zextal's bridge crew watched in mixed horror and fascination as ships moved in patterns that seemed to defy both physics and sanity. "Pizza Roll Squadron, you're drifting out of formation." Emily's voice came clear through the command channel, her tone the same as if she were coordinating a regular raid night. "Remember, we need perfect timing on the solar flare burst." The Admiral watched as a battlecruiser group executed a maneuver that his tactical training insisted was impossible. They'd named it the Triple McTwist with extra cheese, a term that made his translator glitch every time he heard it. "Minji's team is in position," Jason reported from his makeshift command center, his bedroom desk. "Quantum shield harmonics are synchronized with the solar wind fluctuations." The swarm's advance fleet appeared at the edge of the system, their biomechanical ships moving in the perfect, predictable patterns that had conquered a dozen star systems. Their tactical computers began analyzing the human defense formation and crashed. "They're rebooting their combat eye." Katie's excited voice filled the command channel, just like in the simulator. "Quick, hit them with the spicy meatball maneuver while they're confused." The Admiral watched in awe as the combined fleet executed a series of moves that looked like pure chaos, but was actually an intricately choreographed dance of destruction. Ships weaved through solar prominences, using the plasma flows in ways that violated every principle of conventional space combat. "Their targeting systems can't track us through the quantum wake distortion," Sarah reported from London, her voice slightly muffled by what sounded like a mouthful of chips. "Miguel, now would be a really good time for that trick you showed us last weekend." The Mexican teens battle group spun into action, their shields pulsing in a pattern that somehow transformed enemy weapons fire into bonus energy for their engines. The swarm's tactical computers attempted to analyze this impossibility and crashed again. "They're doing that thing." Emily's voice rose with excitement. "You know, like when you get the raid boss stuck in its animation loop. Quick, everybody spam the weird attacks while their AI is buffering." The combined fleet unleashed a barrage that defied classification. Ships moved in fractal patterns that shouldn't have been possible, firing weapons in sequences that read more like a jazz improvisation than a military assault. Admiral." One of his bridge officers spoke hesitantly. "The human children are. They're arguing about who gets to name the new attack formations. Apparently, there's a dispute between Quantum Pepperoni Blast and Supernova Hot Sauce Strike." Before Zextal could respond, the main tactical display lit up with alerts. The swarm's primary battle computer, faced with input that contradicted every known law of combat, had initiated a complete system shutdown. Their ships hung motionless in space, their AI cores caught in an infinite loop trying to process strategies that their programming insisted couldn't exist. "Big Boss is stunned." Emily's voice rang with triumph. "Everybody spam your ultimate abilities now." The combined fleet struck as one, their attacks coordinated with the precision of teenagers who had spent countless hours practicing for this moment, even if they hadn't known it was real. The swarm's mighty armada, terror of a dozen star systems, fell to tactics developed by children who thought they were just getting better at their favorite game. "Woo! New high score," Katie cheered. "Oh wait, can I get a timeout? My mom's calling me down for dinner." Admiral Zextal stared at the tactical display, watching the remnants of the swarm fleet retreat in disarray. His most experienced officers were still trying to understand exactly what they had just witnessed. The after-action reports would take years to compile, and nobody would believe them anyway. "Hey, Admiral." Emily's voice came through again. "That was super fun. But can we wrap this up soon? I still have math homework to finish, and Ms. Johnson doesn't accept saving the solar system as an excuse for late assignments." The most decisive victory in the history of space warfare had just been coordinated by a group of kids who were now worried about their bedtime. 3 months after what historians would later call the Pizza Roll Offensive, Admiral Zextal stood before the Galactic Security Council in a scene that felt eerily familiar. This time, however, the mood was decidedly different. And so, he concluded his presentation. I recommend the immediate establishment of the Human Tactical Intuition Program, with our first group of consultants already selected. On the massive display behind him, Emily Anderson's latest stream played silently. She was teaching a class of young Centaurian cadets how to think outside the quantum box. Their bioluminescence patterns showed a mix of confusion and awe as she explained why conventional tactics were totally boring. To be clear, a Proximan delegate's translator crackled. You want us to formally recognize human gaming streams as advanced military training. They've already revolutionized our combat doctrine. Zextal's mandibles clicked with amusement. We might as well make it official. The display shifted to show Jason's latest project, a collaborative effort between human teenagers and alien tactical AI developers. They were creating what he called a better tutorial system for actual fleet commanders. But they're so young, the Proximan protested. That's precisely the point. Zextal brought up another feed. Watch this. The screen showed Katie leading a mixed group of human and alien students through a complex tactical scenario. Her voice was patient as she explained. No, see, you're thinking too much like an admiral. Try thinking like you're trying to beat your high score while also texting your friends about weekend plans. The results speak for themselves, the admiral continued. The first graduating class of the hybrid training program showed a 300% improvement in tactical innovation. Though we did have to ban energy drinks after the incident with the quantum singularity generator. In another window, Minji was demonstrating her latest strategic breakthrough to a group of stunned alien military theorists. She had discovered it while trying to find a faster way to complete missions so she could make it to her piano recital on time. What about their education? Another delegate asked. Surely these responsibilities interfere with their normal development. Zextal pulled up Emily's latest report card. Her grades have actually improved. Apparently, calculating quantum shield harmonics helps with advanced calculus, though her history teacher is still adjusting to hearing major space battles described as that really epic raid from last Tuesday. The display showed multiple feeds now. Sarah teaching alien cadets how to think creatively under pressure, Miguel explaining how to use glitches in reality to tactical advantage, and dozens of other young humans sharing their unique perspectives on space combat. There is one small problem, Zextal admitted. The human children have started rating actual space battles on their difficulty scale. The swarm invasion was apparently only a mid-tier boss fight. They're hoping for something more challenging next time. The council chamber erupted in nervous laughter. The idea that humanity's children saw galactic warfare as simply another game to master was simultaneously terrifying and reassuring. Oh, and they've renamed everything, the admiral added. Our standard fleet formations are now officially known as Classic Mode. The children insist it's more user-friendly. On the main screen, Emily was wrapping up her latest training session. A young Rigelian cadet raised an appendage. But Instructor Anderson, what if we encounter a situation not covered in the tactical database? Emily grinned, sharing a knowing look with Admiral Zextal through the video feed. That's the best part. If you don't know what's impossible, everything becomes possible. Now, who wants to learn about the tactical applications of cat videos in psychological warfare? As the council prepared to vote on the program's formal adoption, the Admiral's personal communicator chimed. It was a message from Emily. Hey, we're having a pizza party to celebrate Sarah's new quantum targeting algorithm. Want to come? We saved you some pizza rolls. Zextal looked at the waiting council, then at the message. The fate of galactic warfare had been forever changed by children who saw the impossible as simply the next level to beat. And somehow, that felt exactly right. Tell them to save me a seat, he typed back. But this time, no discussing tactical innovations with your mouths full. The future of space combat would be shaped by homework deadlines, pizza parties, and the unlimited imagination of those who never learned what couldn't be done. And that might just be humanity's greatest contribution to the galaxy.
The emergency klaxon wailed across the Galactic Supreme Council chambers with all the urgency of a fire drill at a retirement home, which, considering the average age of council members was roughly 4,000 years, wasn't entirely inaccurate. "Silence!" bellowed Chairman Blorthak the Magnificent, whose magnificence was primarily limited to his ability to shout louder than anyone else in a room full of beings who had evolved past the need for vocal cords. His 12 eyes swiveled independently as he surveyed the chaos before him. "We have a crisis of unprecedented proportions." The assembled representatives of 47 galaxies gradually quieted down, which took approximately 17 minutes, because the molluscoid delegate from Sector 12 moved at the speed of continental drift, and waiting for him to stop talking was a constitutional requirement nobody had bothered to change in 3 millennia. "Esteemed colleagues," Blorthak continued, his voice dripping with the kind of artificial gravitas that suggested he'd been practicing this speech in the mirror, "we face our greatest challenge since the great paperwork shortage of 2847. A collective shudder ran through the assembly. That had been a dark time indeed. After 47,000 years of galactic expansion, Blorthak declared, his tentacles waving dramatically, after conquering 14 million star systems, after assimilating every known species from the noble crystalline philosophers of Andromeda Prime to the rather chewy warrior clans of the Magellanic Clouds, we have discovered something that shakes the very foundation of our glorious empire. The tension in the room was so thick, you could have cut it with a ceremonial space sword. Unfortunately, ceremonial space swords had been banned after the incident of 3001, which nobody talked about, but everyone remembered with a peculiar twitch in their secondary nervous systems. "There exists," Blorthak paused for maximum dramatic effect, which lasted roughly 37 seconds because he'd forgotten what came next and had to consult his notes. "One planet that has never been conquered by any galactic empire in the entire recorded history of civilization." The silence that followed was the kind of silence that occurs when several hundred incredibly intelligent beings simultaneously realize they've overlooked something monumentally obvious. "Impossible!" shrieked Vraxia the eternally pessimistic, whose species had evolved the ability to find fault with anything, including sunshine and the concept of happiness. "Our expansion protocols are perfect. Our conquest algorithms are mathematically flawless. How could there possibly be an unconquered world?" "I'm afraid it's true," sighed Kleptonius, the perpetually anxious chief galactic historian and holder of the record for most nervous breakdowns in a single millennium. His 6 hands shuffled through an impressive stack of data crystals that glowed with the accumulated knowledge of eons. "The planet is called Earth." A collective gasp echoed through the chamber, which was impressive, considering that half the delegates didn't actually breathe. "Earth?" repeated Blorthak, pronouncing the word as if it tasted like week-old space cabbage. "What kind of ridiculous name is that? It sounds like dirt." "Actually," Kleptonius mumbled, "according to our linguistic analysis, that's exactly what it means. They literally named their planet Dirt." The absurdity of this revelation hung in the air like a bad smell at a diplomatic dinner. "How is this possible?" demanded Admiral Zerixia, the overwhelmingly confident, whose confidence was matched only by her complete inability to understand why anyone would ever doubt her strategic brilliance. "Every planet falls to superior military might. It's the fundamental law of galactic politics." "Well," Kleptonius continued, his voice getting smaller with each word, "that's where things get complicated. According to our records, Earth has been attempted by approximately 43 different galactic empires over the past 50,000 years. "Attempted?" Blorthak's eye stalks quivered with indignation. "What do you mean, attempted? You either conquer a planet or you don't. There's no middle ground." That's just it, Kleptonius whispered, as if saying it too loudly might make it more true. They all disappeared. The word disappeared landed in the chamber like a wet fish at a formal banquet, uncomfortable, messy, and raising far too many questions. Disappeared. Vraxia's pessimism reached new heights of despair. Entire invasion fleets, whole armadas, disappeared where? We don't know, Kleptonius admitted, wringing four of his hands while using the other two to desperately search through his files. The last communication from each invasion force was typically something along the lines of "everything going according to plan," or "primitive species offers no resistance," or "this should be over by lunchtime." "And then?" prompted Admiral Zrixia, though her overwhelming confidence was beginning to show tiny hairline cracks. "And then, nothing. Complete communications blackout. No distress signals, no final transmissions, no dramatic last words. They just stopped existing." The mathematical impossibility of this situation caused several of the more logical species to experience what could only be described as intellectual seizures. "This is preposterous," Blorthak declared, his magnificence reaching new levels of indignant fury. "Are you suggesting that a planet populated by beings so primitive they still use fossil fuels and argue about whether climate change exists has somehow defeated the combined military might of 43 galactic empires?" "I'm not suggesting anything," Kleptonius replied miserably. "I'm simply reading the data, which incidentally makes absolutely no sense whatsoever." Admiral Zrixia stood up, her natural confidence reasserting itself like a bad rash. Clearly, previous attempts failed due to insufficient commitment to the cause. What we need is a proper invasion force, something with enough firepower to sterilize a small moon. The tyrannic empire of Vega 7 tried that, Kleptonius noted glumly. They brought a fleet capable of turning a gas giant into plasma. Last transmission. "These humans are adorable. They've offered us something called coffee." "Coffee?" Blorthak looked puzzled. "What's coffee?" "We have no idea." The record ends there. The silence that followed was pregnant with the kind of profound confusion that typically precedes really bad decisions. "Enough!" Admiral Zrixia declared, her confidence now at dangerously high levels. "I propose we assemble the largest invasion force in galactic history. Every available ship, every weapon, every soldier. We'll show this Earth what happens when you ignore the natural order of galactic conquest." The vote was unanimous, which should have been everyone's first clue that they were about to make a spectacular mistake. As the session ended and delegates began filing out to begin preparations for the greatest military disaster in galactic history, Kleptonius sat alone among his data crystals, staring at a small notation he'd found buried in the deepest archives. It was a single line, written in the ancient script of the First Empire. Some doors should never be opened. He wondered what it meant. He would find out soon enough. Within 72 hours of the Great Decision, the galaxy's most spectacular logistical nightmare began to unfold across 14 sectors. Admiral Zrixia had requested the largest invasion force in galactic history, and the bureaucratic machinery of 47 civilizations had responded with the enthusiasm of a caffeinated tornado hitting a paperwork factory. "Status report!" bellowed Zrixia from the bridge of her flagship, the Inevitable Triumph, a vessel so massive it had its own postal code and 3 separate ecosystems. Her overwhelming confidence had somehow managed to increase overnight, reaching levels that would have been considered dangerous in any species with a functioning sense of self-preservation. "Well," began Commander Flibberton, the methodically precise, consulting a datapad the size of a small building, "we've assembled 17,000 battleships, 46 million support vessels, and approximately 12 billion soldiers from across the known galaxy. We've also somehow acquired a small moon, though nobody remembers ordering it." "Excellent," Zrixia declared. completely missing the part about the mysterious moon. And our intelligence on the target? That's where things get interesting, Flibberton replied, in the tone of someone who was desperately trying to avoid using the word catastrophic. Our intelligence files on Earth appear to be, well, they're not there. Not there? Zrixia's confidence flickered for approximately 0.3 seconds before reasserting itself with renewed vigor. What do you mean, not there? I mean the files don't exist. At all. Anywhere. We have detailed tactical analyses of every grain of sand on 47 million worlds. But when it comes to Earth, our intelligence database contains exactly one entry. Mostly harmless. Mostly harmless, Zrixia repeated slowly. That's it? Actually, there's also a note that says don't panic, but nobody knows what that means either. Meanwhile, 3 sectors away, Kleptonius, the perpetually anxious, was having what could charitably be described as a complete nervous breakdown. He had been tasked with finding any useful information about Earth's military capabilities, and the results had been profoundly disturbing. "This is impossible!" he shrieked at his assistant, a patient being called Wobblethorpe, whose species communicated primarily through interpretive dance. "I've searched through 47,000 years of historical records, and every single file about Earth is either corrupted, missing, or ends with the phrase, 'I don't understand what just happened.'" Wobblethorpe performed what appeared to be a very sympathetic interpretive dance about the frustrations of archival research. "Look at this!" Kleptonius waved a data crystal frantically. The Mordekian Empire, masters of psychological warfare, their final transmission was, "The humans have invited us to something called a barbecue. They seem very excited about showing us their grilling techniques." Another dance from Wobblethorpe, this one seemingly about the universal appeal of grilled food. "Or this!" Kleptonius grabbed another crystal. "The silicon-based collective of Proxima Beta, beings of pure logic who had never failed to conquer a carbon-based species. Their last message was fascinating. The humans have introduced us to a concept called sarcasm. We are confused, but intrigued." Wobblethorpe's interpretive dance suggested that sarcasm was indeed a dangerous weapon. "And the worst part," Kleptonius continued, his anxiety reaching levels that were causing minor gravitational distortions, "is that none of these empires reported any resistance. No weapons fire, no military response, no defensive strategies. They all just stopped reporting." Back on the inevitable Triumph, Admiral Zrixia was receiving increasingly bizarre reports from her intelligence division. "Ma'am," reported Lieutenant Quibbleton the easily flustered, "we've managed to intercept some Earth communications, but, well, they don't make any sense." "Explain," Zrixia commanded, her confidence somehow managing to increase despite mounting evidence that maybe, possibly, this whole thing was a terrible idea. "Well, they appear to spend most of their time arguing about something called pineapple on pizza, and whether something called the dress is blue or gold. We've run this through our most advanced psychological analysis computers, and they've all had what can only be described as nervous breakdowns." "What else?" Zrixia demanded. "They have a global network where they share pictures of small domestic animals with humorous captions. Our xenopsychologists are completely baffled. One of them was found this morning rocking in a corner, muttering something about cat memes and the futility of existence." Surely they have some military communications?" Zrixia asked, though her overwhelming confidence was developing some distinctly wobbly edges. "We did intercept some military traffic," Quibbleton admitted nervously. "They appear to be very concerned about something called toilet paper shortages and whether their coffee is strong enough. Also, there's extensive debate about who left dirty dishes in something called the break room." Admiral Zrixia stared at the data in growing bewilderment. How could a species that argued about coffee and toilet paper have defeated 43 galactic empires? "Perhaps," she said slowly, "they're using some kind of advanced camouflage technology, hiding their true military capabilities. "We considered that," Quibbleton replied, "but our scans show they're still using primitive chemical rockets and something called nuclear weapons, which are roughly equivalent to firecrackers compared to our antimatter cannons." "Then how?" Zrixia's confidence finally showed its first major crack. "We don't know, Mom, but there's something else. We've detected unusual energy readings from the Earth system. Nothing technological, but, well, it's almost like the space around Earth is somehow different. Different how? We're not sure. Our instruments keep giving us readings that make no sense, like reality itself is slightly off in that region of space." As the massive fleet approached the outer edge of the Sol system, Kleptonius finally found something in the archives that made his blood run cold. It was a fragment of a report from the very first empire to attempt Earth's conquest, 50,000 years ago. The message was corrupted, but a few words were still readable. Not what they appear. Something fundamentally wrong. The planet itself. Do not approach. They don't know what they are. He tried to contact Admiral Zrixia, but it was too late. The fleet had already entered Earth's solar system, and something very, very strange was about to happen. On Earth, in a small convenience store in downtown Bumbleshire, a man named Munbert Crankshaw was having an absolutely ordinary day, completely unaware that the largest invasion force in galactic history was currently bearing down on his planet. He was, at that precise moment, arguing with his customer about whether the lottery ticket she just bought was lucky or unlucky, while his neighbor, Gladys Trundlebottom, was outside watering her petunias and humming a tune that would, in approximately 6 hours, fundamentally alter the course of galactic civilization. Neither of them had any idea that they were about to become the most terrifying beings in the known universe. While Admiral Zrixia's fleet maintained its steady course toward Earth, Kleptonius, the perpetually anxious, had barricaded himself in the deepest archives of the Galactic Library, surrounded by enough caffeine substitutes to power a small space station. His discovery of the fragmented warning had sent his anxiety levels into previously unmapped territory. "There has to be something," he muttered, frantically sorting through data crystals that hadn't been accessed in millennia. 43 empires don't just vanish without leaving better records. His assistant Wobblethorpe performed an interpretive dance that roughly translated to, "Maybe we should consider the possibility that some mysteries are better left unsolved." But Kleptonius was far too panicked to appreciate philosophical choreography. "Aha!" he suddenly shrieked, causing a small avalanche of ancient files. The personal log of Emperor Graxthul, the magnificently doomed. The crystal was nearly black with age, its data barely readable, but Kleptonius managed to extract a few crucial fragments. His hands shook as he read aloud. Day 1. Earth approaches. Primitive species shows no signs of advanced technology. Victory seems inevitable. Day 3. Humans have invited our advanced scouts to something called a block party. Our warriors are confused but surprisingly entertained. Day 7. Strange developments. Our troops report feeling unusually relaxed. Several have begun growing small plants in containers. They call it gardening and seem inexplicably happy about it. Day 12. Our invasion schedule has been delayed. The humans introduced us to something called small talk about the weather. Our psychological warfare specialists are having identity crises. Day 18. Urgent. Something is fundamentally wrong with this planet. Our soldiers are no longer responding to military commands. They keep asking about work-life balance and whether we offer dental coverage. Day 23. The humans have taught us about casual Fridays. I don't understand what this means, but our entire military hierarchy has collapsed. Everyone is wearing something called jeans. Final entry. We are no longer an invasion force. We have become something else. The humans don't seem to understand that we came to conquer them. They keep offering us food and asking about our families. I think we're happy. This is impossible. We are a species of warrior philosophers who have conquered 14 galaxies through superior military strategy and existential dread. We do not do happiness. We must leave immediately before... The log ended abruptly. Kleptonius stared at the crystal in growing horror. "What the hell is a casual Friday?" he whispered. Meanwhile, 3 sectors away, Dr. Phylaxis the Overthinking was having his own breakdown in the Galactic Psychiatric Research Division. As the galaxy's leading expert on xenopsychology, he had been tasked with analyzing the psychological profiles of humans to determine their weaknesses. The results had been profoundly disturbing. "Director Blinkthorn," he reported to his superior via hologram, his voice trembling with scientific bewilderment, "I've completed my analysis of human psychological patterns, and I'm afraid the results are unprecedented." Director Blinkthorn, the perpetually impatient, materialized in the room, his 14 arms crossed in an expression of barely contained irritation. "Just give me the summary, Doctor. How do we break their spirits?" "That's just it, Doctor," Phylaxis replied, consulting notes that seemed to make him more confused the more he read them. "We can't break their spirits. They've already broken themselves and somehow become stronger because of it. That makes no sense whatsoever." "I know! Look at this!" Dr. Phylaxis waved a datapad frantically. "They have something called Monday mornings, which they universally despise. Yet they voluntarily subject themselves to this torture every week for their entire adult lives." Director Blinkthorn's expression suggested he was reconsidering his career choices. "And it gets worse," Dr. Phylaxis continued. "Dr. Phylaxis, they have a concept called traffic jams, where they sit motionless in metal containers for hours, apparently by choice, while simultaneously complaining about it and accepting it as inevitable. Surely they must have some psychological breaking point. You'd think so, wouldn't you? But no, they've developed something called coffee humor, where they make jokes about being tired and overworked while continuing to be tired and overworked. It's like they've weaponized their own misery." Director Blinkthorn was beginning to understand why previous invasion attempts had failed so spectacularly. "But the most terrifying discovery," Dr. Phylaxis whispered, "is something called customer service. They have entire industries built around being polite to people who are actively hostile to them, and they do this voluntarily for money while maintaining something called a positive attitude. That's impossible. No species can survive that level of psychological stress." "That's what I thought, but they've somehow turned it into a virtue. They call it professionalism, and they're proud of it." Director Blinkthorn flickered uncertainly. "Doctor, are you suggesting that humans are psychologically invulnerable?" "I'm suggesting something far worse. I think they're psychologically evolved. They've been accidentally training themselves for psychological warfare for thousands of years without realizing it." Back aboard the Inevitable Triumph, Admiral Zrixia was reviewing the latest intelligence reports with growing unease. Her overwhelming confidence was developing some seriously concerning cracks. "Ma'am," reported Commander Flibberton, "we've intercepted more human communications. They appear to be discussing something called tax season, with a level of resigned acceptance that our torture specialists find deeply unsettling." "Torture specialists?" Zrixia asked weakly. "They've submitted formal requests for reassignment. Apparently, after listening to humans discuss mortgage rates and insurance premiums, they've lost all confidence in their ability to inflict psychological suffering." Admiral Zrixia felt something she hadn't experienced in over 2,000 years of military service: doubt. "Commander," she said slowly, "are we absolutely certain that Earth is inhabited by a primitive species?" "According to all available data, yes, ma'am. They still argue about whether climate change is real while simultaneously preparing for weather disasters caused by climate change." "And they do this willingly?" "Apparently so. They also have something called social media, where they voluntarily expose themselves to the opinions of millions of strangers, most of whom disagree with them violently. Admiral Zrixia sat down heavily in her command chair. For the first time in her military career, she was beginning to suspect that maybe, just maybe, they had bitten off more than they could chew. On Earth, Munbert Crankshaw had just finished explaining to Mrs. Henderson why the lottery ticket she'd bought was statistically worthless, while simultaneously selling her 3 more tickets, because that's what customer service was all about. He then spent 10 minutes listening to her complaints about the weather, offering appropriate sympathy while secretly wondering if it was too early for his coffee break. His neighbor Gladys had finished watering her petunias and was now engaged in the traditional human activity of standing in her garden, staring at plants that were growing at an imperceptibly slow rate and feeling inexplicably satisfied about it. Neither of them realized that these perfectly normal human behaviors were being monitored by the most advanced psychological analysis equipment in the galaxy, and that said, equipment was currently experiencing what could only be described as a complete existential meltdown. The invasion fleet was now less than 6 hours away from Earth orbit, and absolutely nothing was going according to plan. At precisely 1432 Galactic Standard Time, the inevitable triumph crossed into what humans optimistically called the Outer Solar System, and immediately every single piece of advanced alien technology began behaving like a shopping cart with a wonky wheel. "What the hell is happening?" Admiral Zrixia bellowed as her command console started displaying what appeared to be recipe suggestions for something called banana bread. "Ma'am," Commander Flibberton shouted over the sound of their navigation system, which had begun playing what could only be described as smooth jazz. "Our instruments are detecting massive energy fluctuations throughout the solar system." "What kind of energy fluctuations?" "We don't know. Our sensors keep giving us readings that suggest the fundamental laws of physics are more like guidelines in this region of space." Admiral Zrixia's overwhelming confidence finally cracked completely. "That's impossible. Physics doesn't have guidelines. Physics has laws. Tell that to Jupiter, ma'am. According to our scans, it appears to be humming. Planets don't hum. This one does. Also, Saturn's rings are apparently playing what our computer identifies as the Macarena." Meanwhile, in the ship's quantum laboratory, Dr. Nebelthwaite, the scientifically certain, was having what could only be described as a complete academic nervous breakdown. His life's work had been built on the fundamental principle that reality followed predictable patterns. This solar system was apparently treating predictable patterns as amusing suggestions. "The laws of thermodynamics," he wailed to his assistant, a being called Grimbleton, whose species communicated exclusively through concerned whimpering. "They're not laws here. They're more like polite recommendations." Grimbleton whimpered in a way that suggested deep philosophical concern. "And gravity," Dr. Nebelthwaite continued, waving his instruments frantically. "Gravity is behaving like it's had too much to drink. Objects are falling up in some areas, sideways in others, and there's a small asteroid near Mars that appears to be falling in the shape of a question mark." On the bridge of the flagship, the situation was deteriorating rapidly. Admiral Zrixia was staring at tactical displays that made absolutely no sense whatsoever. "Commander," she said in a voice that suggested her sanity was hanging by a very thin thread, "why is our targeting computer asking me about my feelings?" "Unknown, ma'am. Also, our weapon systems have apparently developed what the computer describes as performance anxiety and are refusing to charge up properly. What about our communications array?" "Well, ma'am, we're receiving 17,000 different Earth television broadcasts simultaneously, and our translation computers are having nervous breakdowns trying to understand something called reality television." As if summoned by the mere mention of Earth communications, Lieutenant Quibbleton burst onto the bridge in a state of barely controlled panic. "Admiral," he gasped, We've made contact with Earth's planetary defense system. Finally, Zrixia declared, her confidence attempting a brief comeback. Let me speak to their military command. That's just it, ma'am, Quibbleton replied, consulting his datapad with the expression of someone who had given up trying to understand anything. There is no unified military command. We're getting responses from approximately 47 different organizations, most of which appear to be arguing with each other about jurisdiction. What do you mean, arguing about jurisdiction? Well, the organization called NASA says space is their department, but something called the FAA claims we're violating air traffic control regulations. Meanwhile, an entity called the DMV is demanding we register our vehicles and take a written test. Admiral Zrixia felt reality slipping away from her like sand through her tentacles. The DMV wants us to take a test. Apparently so. Also, someone called the IRS is asking about our tax status, and a group identifying themselves as Homeland Security wants to know if we have anything to declare. Declare? Zrixia's voice had reached frequencies that were causing structural damage to nearby bulkheads. We're an invasion force. What are we supposed to declare? I asked them that, Quibbleton replied helpfully. They said we need to fill out Form 659B and have our passports ready for inspection. We don't have passports. They said that's what everyone says. At this point, Admiral Zrixia made a command decision that would have horrified military strategists across 47 galaxies. She decided to try diplomacy. Open a channel to Earth, she ordered. I'll speak to whoever's in charge down there. Which organization, ma'am? I don't care, any of them. The main screen flickered to life, revealing the face of a pleasant-looking human woman sitting behind what appeared to be a desk made of pressed wood particles. Behind her was a sign that read, Department of Interplanetary Relations, Bumbleshire County Office. Hello, the woman said brightly. This is Gladys Trundlebottom, Deputy Assistant to the Subdirector of Extraterrestrial Affairs. How can I help you today? Admiral Zrixia stared at the screen. This was not what she had expected. Are you Earth's military leader? Oh, goodness, no. Gladys laughed, a sound that somehow made every alien on the bridge feel slightly better about their life choices. I'm just filling in for Marlene while she's at her dentist appointment. Are you folks here about the invasion? Yes, Zrixia shouted. We are the largest military force in galactic history, and we have come to conquer your pathetic planet. Oh, how lovely, Gladys replied, apparently missing the entire conquest part of the conversation. We've been expecting you. I have your paperwork right here somewhere. She began rummaging through filing cabinets with the unhurried efficiency of someone who had never met a bureaucratic challenge she couldn't handle. Paperwork. Zrixia's remaining sanity was now hanging by a molecular thread. Oh, yes, dear. You can't just invade a planet without proper documentation. There are procedures. Ah, here we are. Gladys produced a form that appeared to be roughly the size of a small novel. You'll need to fill out Form 247B, Application for Hostile Planetary Takeover, in triplicate. This is insane. I know it seems like a lot of paperwork, Gladys sympathized, but we had terrible problems with the last group who tried to skip the proper channels. They ended up stuck in our immigration system for 6 months. Poor things couldn't conquer anything until their visas were approved. Commander Flibberton leaned over to Admiral Zrixia and whispered, Ma'am, perhaps we should consider the possibility that we've made a terrible mistake. On Earth, Munbert Crankshaw was having his lunch break and wondering why his neighbor Gladys had suddenly been promoted to Deputy Assistant to the Subdirector of Extraterrestrial Affairs. He was pretty sure that job hadn't existed yesterday. He was also pretty sure that the 17,000 spaceships currently visible in the sky probably meant something important was happening. But since nobody seemed particularly worried about it, he figured it was probably just another government thing that would sort itself out eventually. Meanwhile, in the deepest archives of the Galactic Library, Kleptonius, the perpetually anxious, had found one final fragment that made his blood run colder than liquid nitrogen. It was a single line, written in the handwriting of the galaxy's greatest military strategist. Earth is not a planet, it's a test. He tried to contact the fleet, but their communications were now completely jammed with requests for tax documentation and invitations to local community events. The invasion had officially become the galaxy's most bureaucratic nightmare, and they hadn't even landed yet. While Admiral Zrixia stared at Form 247B with the expression of someone who had just discovered that mathematics was optional, Dr. Nebelthwaite, the scientifically certain, was making discoveries that were rapidly destroying everything he thought he knew about reality. "Commander!" He burst onto the bridge, his lab coat smoking slightly from what appeared to be a small explosion involving quantum mechanics and common sense. "I figured out what's wrong with this solar system." "Wrong?" Admiral Zrixia looked up from the form, which seemed to be asking for her mother's maiden name and whether she had any previous experience with planetary conquest. "What do you mean, wrong? This entire region of space exists in a state of controlled chaos." "Doctor," Nebelthwaite declared, waving readings that looked like they'd been drawn by a caffeinated octopus, "the laws of physics haven't been broken. They've been rewritten. That's impossible. You can't just rewrite the laws of physics." "Apparently you can. According to my calculations, this solar system operates on what I can only describe as narrative physics." Commander Flibberton looked confused. "What the devil is narrative physics?" "Reality here doesn't follow scientific laws. It follows story logic. Things happen not because they're scientifically possible, but because they're narratively appropriate." Admiral Zrixia felt her remaining grip on sanity loosening. "Are you telling me that this solar system runs on plot convenience? Worse, it runs on human plot convenience. Everything that happens here is designed to create the most ironically appropriate outcome for the humans involved." At that precise moment, as if summoned by the mention of ironic appropriateness, Lieutenant Quibbleton stumbled onto the bridge, carrying what appeared to be a small mountain of paperwork. "Admiral," he gasped, "Earth's bureaucratic response system has activated. We're receiving documentation requirements from 17 different governmental agencies, 43 local councils, and something called the Better Business Bureau, which wants to know if we're properly licensed for interdimensional commerce. We're not doing interdimensional commerce, we're invading. They say that's what everyone claims, and we need Form 1040-EZ to prove it." Dr. Nebelthwaite consulted his instruments frantically. "Admiral, I'm detecting massive reality distortions centered around the planet's surface. Whatever's causing this effect, it's getting stronger." "What kind of reality distortions?" "Well, for starters, our weapon systems have apparently decided they're conscientious objectors and are refusing to target anything that looks inhabited. Also, our invasion manual has spontaneously rewritten itself into what appears to be a cookbook for something called Sunday Roast." Meanwhile, on Earth's surface, Munbert Crankshaw was experiencing what he would later describe as the weirdest Tuesday of his entire life, which was saying something considering he'd once been trapped in an elevator with 3 street performers and a man who insisted he was the reincarnation of Napoleon. He was currently standing behind the counter of his convenience store, watching through the window as 17,000 alien spaceships hung in the sky like the galaxy's most inconvenient traffic jam, while his customer, Mrs. Henderson, continued her detailed analysis of why lottery tickets were a waste of money, while simultaneously buying 6 more. "Excuse me, young man," Mrs. Henderson said, apparently oblivious to the fact that the sky was currently full of aliens, "but do you know why there's a queue forming outside Gladys Trundlebottom's house?" Munbert looked out the window and discovered that there was indeed a queue, a very long queue, of aliens, standing patiently in line with the resigned acceptance of beings who had encountered Earth's bureaucratic processes and realized that resistance was futile. "I have absolutely no idea. Munbert replied honestly, which was true because he was still trying to figure out why his cash register had started displaying messages in what appeared to be 17 different alien languages, all of which seemed to be asking about extended warranty options. Back in space, Admiral Zerixia was discovering that commanding the largest invasion force in galactic history was significantly more complicated when said force was being systematically processed through what appeared to be the universe's most efficient red tape manufacturing facility. "Status report," she demanded, though her overwhelming confidence had been replaced by what could only be described as overwhelming bewilderment. "Well, ma'am," Commander Flibberton began, consulting a data pad that now seemed to be mainly concerned with local weather forecasts. "Approximately 30% of our fleet has been redirected to something called a welcome center, where they're receiving orientation packets and complimentary tea." Tea? Apparently so. Another 20% has been sent to various government offices to fill out visa applications, and the remainder are stuck in what the humans call a holding pattern while waiting for their turn to speak to someone in customer service. What about our ground forces? They've been informed that they need to complete a health and safety course before they're allowed to invade anything. Something about workplace regulations and proper lifting techniques. Admiral Zerixia stared at her tactical display, which was now showing not military positions, but what appeared to be a detailed map of local coffee shops and their respective opening hours. "Commander," she said slowly, "are we winning this invasion?" "Ma'am, I'm not entirely sure we're still having an invasion. According to our latest reports, it's been reclassified as a large-scale cultural exchange event, and we've been assigned a social worker." Deep in the bowels of the Galactic Library, Kleptonius, the perpetually anxious, had made a discovery that was causing him to reconsider every life choice he'd ever made. He had found the complete records of the First Empire's attempt to invade Earth, and they were far more terrifying than anything he could have imagined. "Day 1, he read aloud to Wobblethorpe, who was performing interpretive dances of increasing concern. "Successful insertion into Earth orbit. Primitive species shows no signs of resistance. Victory estimated within 72 hours. Day 2, slight delay. Earth's government has requested we attend an orientation session before beginning conquest operations. Seems reasonable. Day 5, orientation session was surprisingly informative. Have learned much about human concepts of health insurance and parking regulations. Conquest postponed pending completion of mandatory safety training. Day 15, our warriors are now certified in first aid and proper workplace ergonomics. Local humans very helpful in explaining tax implications of planetary conquest. Beginning to suspect this may be more complicated than anticipated. Day 37, major breakthrough. Humans have agreed to consider surrender, pending completion of environmental impact assessment. Our xenobiologists are preparing documentation regarding potential ecological disruption caused by galactic conquest. Day 89, environmental impact assessment rejected. Apparently, our invasion plans failed to account for carbon footprint and sustainability concerns. Humans have suggested we consider renewable conquest methods. Day 143. Our entire military force has been enrolled in what humans call anger management classes. Our generals are learning about conflict resolution and effective communication strategies. Day 207. Urgent update. We are no longer an invasion force. We have been involuntarily recruited into something called community service. Our warriors are currently helping elderly humans with their shopping and participating in local neighborhood cleanup initiatives. Final entry: we surrender, not to human military might, but to their system. We came to conquer Earth, and instead Earth has conquered US. We are now productive members of human society. Our emperor has been elected to the local school board and is very enthusiastic about fundraising for new playground equipment. Send help or don't. We're actually quite happy here." Kleptonius dropped the crystal and stared at Wobblethorpe, who performed a dance that roughly translated to "I told you so." On Earth, Gladys Trundlebottom was having the time of her life. After 43 years of managing the Bumbleshire County Planning Office, dealing with a galactic invasion was surprisingly similar to handling the annual permit applications for the summer fete, just with more tentacles and fewer complaints about parking. "Next," she called cheerfully, and another bewildered alien admiral shuffled forward with his paperwork. The greatest military force in galactic history had been reduced to